Slavery and taxes, those were the two other things I'm going to talk about. I gave a talk for forces. It wasn't in this building, it was the one before. It was a winter camp or summer camp. And I was talking about how Mahmoud ibn Mahmoud, also known as Saif ibn Qutuz, when he came to the Mongols, had basically killed millions upon millions of people from Mongolia all the way into Persia, Iraq. They also went up north and they went into Russia, and they did the same with Christian people as well. And they went all the way and then into Sham, Syria, etc. Now went towards Palestine and then Egypt. And the man that stopped him was a slave who had risen to power, and then all the slaves had risen to power thereafter. But they were actually sold in the markets before he could actually technically be given leadership, because he is the slave of someone else. Therefore, he wouldn't be a leader, he'd just be an acting puppet for his master. So he had to have been sold first in the markets and been given his freedom. So someone said, you say that Islam was the religion that freed slaves, but I've read otherwise Orientalist books and whatnot. And he gave me a piece of logic that on the outset looks and sounds like logic, but when you look a bit further into it, it totally cracks and blows up and just falls apart. He's saying that there is no proof that Islam got rid of slaves, and there's no proof that Islam made more slaves. So in 14.5 years it just went down, like, no more and no less, and it just all the same number of slaves throughout the ages. If we are to take this to be the truth, then that in and of itself is quite miraculous. That's really, 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 really miraculous. It is state law, except till very recently with the UN and whatnot, but it's state law, that international law, that see, when an army comes to fight another army, this army is fighting that army till the death, and the opposite is true. So you're going there, either I win or I die. That's the mindset that you're going with. Now, international law stated that if you didn't kill the others, you could kill them because they were about to kill you, or you could enslave them. Those there, not then go back into their homelands and enslave them. No, there, people coming to fight you. And if they brought their women and children with them, then that was their problem, and that this was international law between everyone. So Islam came along, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said as guidance to say that if you do something wrong, free a slave. If you do this, free a slave. If you do that, free a slave. Free a slave, free a slave, free a slave, free a slave. And so this atheist person was saying, actually Islam didn't come to free slaves. By saying free a slave, Islam was actually telling people to get slaves in the first place so that they could free them. Right? That was his line of logic. Right? That Islam actually promoted slavery because in order to absolve yourself of that sin, you have to free a slave. And if you didn't have a slave, what would you have done? So that's one of the things. There's usually 3 things. Free a slave, or pay charity, or fast, or do this or do that. So it's not that if you don't have any slaves, you can't absolve yourself of the sin. So that's the first thing. And secondly, why absolve yourself of sin with slavery? Because Islam came, as I said, in the 5 objectives of Sharia, to free the mind, to return honor, to free the lives. Someone's enslaved. It's an act of mercy to enslave someone as opposed to kill them. And this is something you have to admit. You're about to kill someone, instead of killing you, enslave them. Obviously, if you treat them with humanity. The rules of Islam with regards to slavery are a mockery. Right? They're so amazing that you'd want to be a slave. Right? You can't shout at them. They're there to do your job. You're there to work. You just bought a slave, right? You can't shout at them. They have to eat at the same table as you. Right? I mean, in Egypt, when I go back, and they'll have maids. Now, the maid is from a completely lower class. In the upper class, we've got this maid coming work for them. The maid is eating in the kitchen alone, right? And the family, and I'm like, this is not what Allah, we're not even supposed to do this with slaves. She's a free person, right? Why is she eating in the kitchen alone? What is she, some mouse or something? Why is she eating in the kitchen table? This is so wrong. Yeah. Now, it's not surprising that these maids will steal from their employers. Why? Because they're treated like dogs. Now, even if you pay them well, and even if you pay them how much you ask them and a bit more, they still feel like you're dishonoring them. Because they're not eating from the same table as you. They're getting the leftovers. Or even if they're eating the same food, but they're eating over there. What are they? They got the plague? If they got the plague, don't bring it into your house. They got rabies, don't bring it into your house. Yeah? Treat them like human beings. So Islam, you have to eat with them. Right? And this is revolutionary, by the way. This, even till today, is revolutionary. You have to feed them. You have to eat with you. You can't make them do something hard. You can't tell your slave to carry something and that's going to break his back. That's going to give him a slip disc. You can't make him do things like that. He has to sleep. He has to be treated with all his human rights and more. And the same thing happens where you can't slander your slave. You can't do this. They're treated so well. So many of the Sahaba would give, Ali, for example, the Prophet's cousin. He is at home and he has a slave. And he says to the slave, do this. And the slave doesn't do it. He's loafing, right? He's a student at uni. And he says, he comes back and says, did I tell you to do this? He goes, yeah. He says, go do it. He didn't raise his voice because he's not allowed to. This happened 4 or 5 times. He says, why are you not doing it? He said, because I know you can't punish me. So he said, all right, I'll set you free. But what's the point of keeping you and feeding you? Right? But look at the delicacy with which Islam treats other human beings. This is a slave. Never mind another human being who is free but has a different religion. Right? This is a slave. While everyone else was treating their slaves worse than dogs, Islam, the first mu'adhin, the first person to call to prayer, was a black ex-slave. And Muslims here know that if the Qibla is that way, the Kaaba is that way, where we pray towards, if you're not really supposed to put your feet towards that direction, it's not wrong, it's not sinful, but it's lack of manners, because that's the house of, the house of God is over there. Urinating, going to the toilet, you're not supposed to do it in the direction, so you look away. Or you do it, perpendicular. If you're at the Kaaba and you see someone going up to the Kaaba, the house, the Jewish place, and they put their feet on it, you'd see about 2,000 people kicking them to death. It's wrong. They shouldn't do that. 100%. It's wrong. But that's how insulted they would feel, because it's a lack of manners. Bilal, who was black, and even till this day, being black disadvantages you, even though there are black men who exceed 200 million of the perfect race, supposedly, or any race. A black man called Bilal, ex-slave, is doing the call to prayer, one of the most prestigious jobs there is. How does he do the call to prayer? He gets up on top of the Kaaba. His feet are on top of the Kaaba. He's not just touching the Kaaba, he's on top of the Kaaba. And he's Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and he's doing that. Now some of the people that were still had not accepted Islam in Mecca. This was after Fath Makkah. They saw this and they said, this is blasphemous. Yeah? A black slave standing on top, any man standing, but black slave standing on top of it and doing that then? This is ridiculous. Now one of the people standing with him was just about to accept Islam. He said, look, this is God's house. If God doesn't like it, God will stop it. Thunder, lightning, blah, blah, whatever. Right? Nothing happens. And next day, nothing happens. 5 times a day, nothing happens. This is what Islam brought. So when we say that Martin Luther came, or this or that, or slavery was abolished recently, it wasn't. And when you do this thing about, and is it abolished slavery, all these girls coming out from East Europe that are being sold. So during the ages, right, from 0 to 14, however much, if this guy is saying that it hasn't increased and it's not decreased, we're not going to say, fine, it has decreased. We're going to say, fine, okay, well, it's not increased. You go to war with an army, right? So, for example, when the Muslims in the army of Tabuk, there were 30,000 fighting 250,000, and they won. So, how many slaves are you going to? Islam started in Medina and Mecca, and now it's from Spain to China. And you're telling me that in all those wars, the number didn't increase? And that's not miraculous? That's not absolutely amazing? They go, well, why don't you just free all slaves? Well, why don't you just put people that are unemployed, and we're all fed up with them, we don't want to give them, allowances. We don't just pull the plug, do we? You don't. Someone's a slave, and they're born into slavery, or they've been a slave for the last 20 years. You can't just set them free. Just as when you've got, by no way am I saying they're like animals, but just as you've got a cat, you've taken the cat that could have fended for itself, and you've tamed it. And then 10 years later, you're like, okay, you're free now. That's so cruel, isn't it? What the hell? It's going to die within a day or two. So you can't do that with a human being whose mentality has been subservient to his master. You have to change that bit by bit by bit. If all of a sudden 2 million slaves just flooded the market, just a job market, they wouldn't know what to do. Till now there are slaves actually that belong to Muslims in Mauritania. And so many times their masters will say, we set you free, and they say, we don't want to go free. Being with you is better than being free. And lineage, like 7, 8, 9, 10 generations worth. They don't want to do it. Why? You're paying for my food, you're paying for my residence, you treat me really well, I treat you really well. Some of the slaves in Islam were scholars. Scholars are granted a status in Islam higher than kings. Kings would kiss the feet of scholars, because scholars are coming to them with what I have now taught you about Islam. They saw this as something that, this is the ultimate dignifying thing. This comes from God. And these people are teaching us what God has brought down to us. So therefore, they're higher than us. Some of them would be slaves. Slaves, right? So this is slavery. And what Islam has brought, the conception to even conceive that slaves could be set free would never have happened if it was not for Islam. Yeah, would never ever have happened if it was not for Islam. And with regards to tax, so this slave in Egypt, the Mongols are coming, they've killed at least 10, 15 million people. There are cities that are not on the map anymore, in places that now next to Afghanistan. They're not on the map anymore. They used to be pillars of civilization. All history witnesses and bears witness to that. But they're not there anymore. Why? Because they flooded it, just broke the dam and flooded it. People died, doesn't matter. And they did this all the way from the borders of China and Mongolia, all the way up to Sham, Syria, Lebanon, etc. So this man, he says, national security. He goes to Al-Izz ibn Abdel, he says, national security, we need to levy tax. We need to levy tax. These people are coming, we don't have anything in the treasury, we need to levy tax. National security, right? So in terms of the 5 objectives of Sharia, life and religion are now at stake. Egypt's the last stronghold. If they break into Egypt, Islam is gone, right? Everyone's going to be enslaved. Even the Christians began to help the Muslims fight because they were being slaughtered as well. So he went to Al-Izz ibn Abdel, who was the topmost scholar at the time in that area, and he said, no, we don't levy tax. Tax, we don't levy tax. He said, but we'll all die. He said, okay, on one or two conditions. He said, first of all of the rich people, the Sultan and his family and all of the rich people have to give back what they took from the treasury. All that corruption and all that garbage, you have to give it back. If after giving it back, you still need money, then you're only allowed to levy as much as you need in order to fight them. Everyone gave what they had, they didn't need a penny. They didn't need a penny. Does everyone here know what chaos theory is? As in natural theory, not normal student life, huh? You know what chaos theory is? A bit. Right, well, it starts with a bit, and then it magnifies it. Right? The bit that it starts off with, this theory is that there's a butterfly in China or Japan, and it's flapping away. Right? Lovely, pretty little butterfly. And it flaps its wing, and the air that comes out of the wing hits the air coming out of the fan, and it multiplies it, and then that hits something else, and it multiplies it, until by the time it gets to New York, yeah, it's Tornado Catherine or any of the other female names that they happen to all the time give tornado, right? You know. So, a woman's wrath, they say. I don't know why but that's what, it's always been a woman's name as far as I know. So the theory is that one little thing here that you might think, that's so ridiculous, what's that going to do? Makes a tornado all the way over there, right? Now in Islam, this whole Sharia, the comprehensive 7 things that we talked about, when you just fiddle with one of those things, everything else goes haywire. And this is why Al-Izz ibn Abdel said no tax. Because it's haram, it's prohibited. In hadith, it's called muqt in Arabic. To take muqt is worse than sleeping with your mother. Right? I think 40 times or something like that. Not that once would be okay, but do you understand? That's how bad it is. Right? And that's worse than murder. Like sleeping with one's mother, incest is worse than murder. And that's worse than so many other things. That's how bad it is. So Al-Izz said, no, we're not going to levy tax. He said, oh, we're all going to die and religion will be lost. He said, on one condition. So notice, now when we're paying 20% VAT, and we're paying 10%, and 20%, and 30%, and 40%, those of us that are earning more than 40%, where the hell's the money going? Where's it going? Seriously. Where's it going? How are things like this? Where's it going? There were times in Islamic history, many of them, not just once or twice, where the money that they got from zakat, the 2.5% that they got from the Muslims, they didn't know where to spend it. There were no more poor people. They didn't know where to spend it. Right? And this happened more than once, not just once. But then Muslims sometimes strayed and deviated from Islam as well. Sometimes they would levy taxes, sometimes they would, and everything would go haywire. Because it's not about being a Muslim, it's about following Islam. It's not a stamp that you give yourself or that someone else gives you at a mosque, or when you say in front of the congregation at Friday prayer and then everyone comes and kisses and hugs you. They're not doing that. Islam is, being a Muslim is following Islam. It's not the stamp that's given on your forehead. Yeah? It's following Islam. So taxes, this all goes back to the thing about jizya. Oh, they're going to make us pay jizya. You'd love to pay jizya. Trust me, you'd love it. Now we can't do this. Yeah, we can't do this. It's not even up for, and we shouldn't. Someone here is saying, how can we work towards establishing an Islamic state with Sharia law? In Muslim lands, that's fine, and it's being done now with all these revolutions, slowly. But here, we can't do it because we're not in a Muslim country, and there's actually legislation to say that we can't do it. It's not just me being a coward or fighting or being afraid. Who am I being afraid of? Yeah, it's not that. Islamically, it's incorrect because it's not your country. Once it becomes your country, then and only then. Then and only then. Even, there are 2 opinions. Like I said to you at the beginning, I'm going to be very transparent. There are 2 opinions about jihad. One that says it's defensive, purely defensive. So if you know that they're about to attack you, or so right now, America saying to Iran, we're going to attack you. Iran has the right to attack America, right? Under the pretense of this is defensive. This is defensive offense, right? I'm going to attack you before you hit me, right? They could do that under international law because everyone's saying we're going to attack you, then I'm not going to sit here and wait, right? So that's one opinion, that jihad is purely defensive. Another opinion is that jihad can be offensive. But even in that opinion where it's offensive, what happens is that you go to the next country next to you and you say to them, we want to make da'wah. We don't want to fight you. We want to send our people to teach your people about Islam. That's it. If they do not agree with that, then you're fighting them. You fight the army. Why? Because they're stopping people from freedom of knowing other religions. Once the army is gone, but you can't go in there and make them Muslims. You can't take people for slaves unless they're in the army. And even now that would change because of international law. Islam would take that into account. The Khalifa has to take into account context around the place. And these things change. And it's not like everyone's following them anyway. America just does what it wants, really. So I hope I've given you an accurate introduction, right, as to whether Islam is barbaric or not, right? And the reason why I've talked about slavery and money is that when you're paying 60% of your wealth because you're earning more than £40,000, that's very close to being a slave. When you're in a mortgage for 30 years and it's killing you and breaking your back and you don't pay the mortgage for 3 months, right? And you've paid insurance in case this happens, and they still get you out of your house and give you nothing for it, that's very akin to slavery, right? It doesn't matter what you call it, but that's akin to slavery. And that's why I mentioned money and slavery together. Because when wealth is respected, slavery diminishes, right? Whereas now, we're all slaves of the system. We're all really, and once you break out, you're free, but everything's against you until you do that. Someone here is asking, does the 4 witnesses rule apply to rape cases? This is a very sensitive topic. And for, if it's anything sexual, there has to be 4 witnesses. And the reason for that is that slander, if there are no witnesses, if it's just DNA or something like that, there are many, people can be framed, the doors of slander can be opened, yeah? Where people can slander. Now that doesn't mean they get away with it, but I'm just saying it's not classified therefore as a sexual, like fornication or adultery. It's classified as battery, assault. And actually the Khalifa or the judge or whatever has leeway to do what he wishes with it. So you can actually give it more, right? But even here in the West, it's very difficult. There's different types of rape, and it's very difficult to tell someone that to accuse someone of rape. The rape that when you ask me this question is what you're intending. It's very difficult. So what they do is because of many reasons. Oh, but she was wearing and this is happening. Oh, she was wearing a mini skirt and she was being really flirtatious, and she invited me home, right? And only when I was, we were just about to, do it, or we were doing it, and then she said stop, right? That's classified as rape, but it's not the same rape as when he saw her walking in the alley and he beat her or drugged her drink and took her, to some farmhouse and then left her there. Yeah, it's not the same. So it's classified as an assault, right? And not a sexual thing. Why? First of all, not to tarnish the woman, because if it's a sexual assault, then she gets tarnished, her honor gets tarnished. And secondly, things can be framed as well. I don't want to go into unless anyone wants to ask, but I don't want to go into the some people have actually gone further than that and said, actually, see, the worst crime and the worst punishment in Islam is something called haddul muharaba, which is piracy, right? So when someone is a pirate, and there are 3 levels: either they steal your money, or they frighten you, or they steal your money and they frighten you, or they kill you, or they steal your money and they frighten you, right? And for the top one, what we do is we cut one hand and one leg off, and we put them on a cross, and we leave them to die. Yeah, and that's because they're gangs, right? And these people they thrive on fear. And there was a fatwa given in Saudi Arabia that drug dealers were to be dealt like this. And they tried everything. I mean, watch all the movies from the US, read all the UN stuff. Drugs are just, regardless of what you do, there's too much money, and it's in everyone. It's in the drug dealer's benefits so much so that even if he spent all his life in prison, he wouldn't mind, because he's getting all the perks in prison. He's living like a king in prison anyway, so he wouldn't mind. So they tried doing everything. They tried doing everything to stop drugs, and nothing would work. And someone gave a fatwa: this is actually muharaba. This is piracy this is treachery against the state. And they did this with one guy, the top guy, and no one sold drugs for 10 years thereafter, because it was such a repulsive sight. It's like, that's going to happen to me. The benefits aren't there anymore, right? I'm not going to sit in prison like a king. The benefits are not there. I'm going to look like that, and not to mention it hurts. So that hadd al-muharaba, some jurist says that rape would fall under that. But there are other technical things. So like I said, I'm giving you all the 3, there may be more opinions than that as well, because Islam is not a dogmatic religion. It's not a dogmatic religion, not at all. So, if women got raped and there was DNA evidence, the DNA evidence would be taken as a proof of assault and battery, and not proof of, because she could have been willing and then said, no, stop, while we're in the act, right? And you don't know. Or she could have been willing and then afterwards got someone else to beat her up. And then said, look, he raped me. And so there are many things that have to be taken. I don't want the girls going, oh, no, that's not fair. I don't want the guys saying that's not fair as well. It's done in an objective manner. Yeah, it could be done. It's not the first time that a woman said I've been raped and she's not. And it's not the first time that a man has said I've not raped her and he has. So it has to be taken so that you're as objective as possible. And remember that Islam, whether someone gets away with it in this life or not, in the hereafter, they're always held to account. Is there any other questions? Yes.
Okay, so you've spoken a bit, quite a lot about Sharia and things like that, the objectives, the principles of Islamic law in the 21st century, which is good. But does Islam have anything to say? What does Islam have to say about spirituality? I don't know if you might know a bit more about that, because a lot of people in this day and age are fine. They might accept the arguments for Sharia or whatever, but quite a lot of people are looking for something spiritual as well. Can they What does Islam
So what
say
does
about
Islam provide on a spiritual level? Okay, the reason why I came from this was, what does Islam have to provide from a spiritual perspective?
And, yeah, that's,
So the reason why I came with the Sharia thing is because the title I was given was Is Islam Barbaric? So spirituality and Muslim is no barbaric, it's all pacifism. So the thing with spirituality is Islam brings spirituality into everything you do. There are ritualistic things that you have to do, and there are other things, right? And your reward is based upon your intention. So there are two things in Islam for a deed to be accepted by Allah. The intention has to be right, and the form has to be as per the instructions that are given to you by Allah, right? By Allah and by Allah through the Quran and by Allah through the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So if someone prays, but he doesn't have the right intention, he doesn't get rewarded. If someone, comes up with a new way of praying, but he has the right intention, it's for Allah, he doesn't get rewarded. It has to be intention and form. So that's with the ritualistic side. Now, if I'm giving this talk, it's not a form of prayer. But if I do it with the intention it's for Allah, then it's a reward, right? So everyone listening to this, if anyone benefits from this, then I get rewarded from that. If anyone acts upon something that I said, then I get rewarded from that. If anyone here says something to someone else and they benefit from it, then I get rewarded from it, and they get rewarded for telling other people, and the person that taught me gets rewarded. That's where the spirituality element comes into Islam, that I know that Allah is looking at me at all times. So when I eat, if I eat with the intention of strengthening my body, right, because it belongs to Allah, then that's a reward. That's the spiritual aspect of it. Now, there are the spiritual aspects where you say Subhanallah, you say glory to be to Allah, you say Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. There's nothing greater. These things they're all spiritual, isn't it? Just to sit there and meditate, thinking about Allah, you get rewarded for that. Just to long for Allah, just to acknowledge Allah's existence is rewarded. Well, the reason why I'm saying this is that Islam is very objective. Even in our spiritual life, we are objective. Meaning that a man once was praying all day in the mosque, all day, and he said, where does he earn his living from? He said, his brother earns his living, and he shares it. He said, his brother is better than him. Why? Because his brother is doing spiritual acts. He's earning money for his family, and he's doing that for the sake of God. And this guy is just loafing, right, and pecking the floor, right? So that's the fard is yes, and the sunnah yes, but he's leaving his family to be taken care of by another. So spirituality in Islam is an objective spirituality, and that's why I say, from one perspective, we're very social. From another perspective, it's completely capitalistic. Yeah, Islam is very, 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 very open in these matters. So we pray at night. For those of you that want to do extra, you can do tahajjud. It's not just Tarawih, we do this in Ramadan. No, you can do it every day. Praying at night, waking up before Fajr, before dawn. The fact that we pray 5 times a day in and of itself is very spiritual. Taking time out, what happens is you say Allahu Akbar, meaning God is greater. So you're sitting there and you're going through all the stresses of life, and you have to take time out. And when you say God is greater, meaning God is greater than all the crap that I'm going through. God is greater than all the stresses. God is greater than all of my longing, my career, my desire, the pain that comes from this world. God is greater than all of that. And then you speak to God. That's what we believe. Salah means sila, connection with God. So but I was hoping that this would be covered in other lectures. This is usually what gets covered, these aspects, the spiritual aspects. It's a very good question. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the role of forgiveness within the law. So let's say hypothetically a Muslim steals and then sort of repents to Allah, will he be forgiven or will he be punished?
Yes. So where does forgiveness fall into Islamic law? Since someone steals and he repents, does he get punished? There are laws, I can't go into too much detail because of time, but there are laws that are seen as a crime against society and not a crime against an individual. So there are crimes that are committed against God, and there are crimes committed against human beings. And when you commit a crime against a human being, it's also a crime against God, because God told you not to do that. If you commit a crime against God, then all you need to do is say, I'm sorry God, and that's it, end of story. No guilt required, no beating yourself up, nothing like that, yeah? But when it comes to stealing, for example, so I've stolen someone's thing. If I give him it back before I get caught, then that's fine, right? The other thing is a man once said, oh, he stole from me, and it was proven that he stole from me. And then the Prophet said, the conditions have been met, his hand has to be cut off. The man said, I forgive him. He said, had you forgiven him before coming to the state, that's fine. But once you go to the state, only in theft, once you go to the state, then we have to act upon that because you've broken into someone's peace and you've now been alerted to the state. If you kill someone, like I said to you, all of the family have to say we want his life for life. If one of them says I forgive him, then it's too tough. He's forgiven, right? So, but these are. So if I backbite against you, backbiting in Islam is meaning I talk about you badly behind your back, right? If I backbite against you, then that's a sin against God and against you. To get repentance from God, I just say, I'm sorry. But that's not enough. Because I've done you. So now I have to seek your repentance. And you have the right not to give it. You have the right to say no. Or you have the right to say, well, you talk badly. Who did you talk badly? 20 people? Go and talk to the same 20 people and tell them that what you said was wrong. You have the right to do that. Right? Because it's your right. Yeah? So there is a lot of space for forgiveness. But at the same time, I'm going to be frank with this, we're not going to use forgiveness as an excuse to condone crimes. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you, as the person with the right, can drop that right. But we're not going to pressure you to say, drop that right. Because it's your right. By definition, it wouldn't be a right if you could pressure you to drop it. Yeah. Is that cool?
Thank you.
And then the question.
As Muslims, we follow every part of Sharia, obviously. Is it not allowed for us to live in countries that deny us parts, like following parts of the Sharia?
Are we allowed to live in countries that deny us, that stop us from fulfilling parts of Sharia? See, when it comes to your personal parts, like prayer and fasting, etc., then obviously, no. Unless you're forced, you've grown up in communist China and you're saying you can't fast Ramadan, right? Then as best you can, you should either hide the fact that you're fasting or leave that country and go somewhere else. But if a country stops you from cutting someone else's hand, that's not your duty. It never was, even in a Muslim country. That's the duty of the state. And so the state is sinning if it doesn't do that. It's not your problem whether it does it. So there are parts of Sharia where the onus is on you. So and in Usul Fiqh, this is called there are different types of farm, right? Wada'i. This is some of them are wada'i. Yeah? So where it's not your problem to make the sun set so that you can pray Maghrib. But when it sets, you have to pray Maghrib. Do you understand? So if you're in a Muslim state, that's one of those ahkam wada'iyya, yeah? Where if that happens, then you do. Right? It's just like computer programming. If that happens, then you do. If that doesn't happen, then it's not your problem. If the sun doesn't set, it's not your problem. Right? You don't then go, you figure out how to make the sun set. Take one from here and then. If you're punished under Sharia law and the person repented, would he still be punished by Allah? No. That's the whole point of being punished by Sharia law, is that it cleanses you in this way. Is there a state implementing Islamic Sharia perfectly today? No. Why not? Because, for example, Saudi, they'll implement it on the poor. And is there a state today that implements Sharia properly? And the answer to that is no. And why? Because why I say no, is because they're implementing on the poor and the weak and not on the rich and the strong. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said that implementing the hudud, an eye for an eye, right? When someone knows that I'm going to die after I kill him, they don't do it. They don't do it, right? So because of that, the Prophet peace be upon him, he said, for one of these punishment, these hudud, to be implemented is better than 40 days worth of rain. And he was saying this to people in a drought, in a desert. So, and he also said that the people before us, and he was talking particularly about the Jews, who were given guidance and were the chosen people by Allah, and we favor them. We give them the esteem that they are due. The people before you were destroyed because they would implement the Sharia on some and they wouldn't implement it on others. And he said, I swear by the hand of Allah. You have to understand, wa'imullah. I swear by the hand of Allah, the right hand of Allah. And we don't go into what kind of hand he has. We just say, he says, that's it, he's got a hand. We don't know what kind of hand it is. Wa'imullah, law saraqat, if the daughter of Muhammad, the messenger, were to steal, I would cut her hand. So by the right hand of Allah, I would cut her right hand. Do you understand? Because she stole. It doesn't matter now, she's the daughter of the prince, or the son, or whatever. It doesn't. She stole. And this happened after Zayd ibn Haritha, the guy that he had adopted. And then Allah said, change his surname back to his father's. He came to give a nice word for a rich woman that had stolen. She's rich, she doesn't need to steal. Why the hell was she stealing? She stole. Need cut her hand off. And Prophet Muhammad was really angry. He said, are we going to destroy ourselves the way that other people destroyed themselves before? She's rich, it doesn't matter, she had her hand. So in Saudi Arabia, they don't do that. If you're poor, come here. If you're rich, you're okay. I mean, you know, what's happening now, the oil that's coming out, that's not their oil. It's not his dad's oil. Even though his dad thinks it's his oil. It's not his dad's oil. It doesn't belong to him. In Libya, it's not his dad's oil either. The oil needs to be spent not only in Libya, but for all Muslim lands. All the oil. If just, by the way, just the zakat, right? And it's not 2.5% because what comes from the earth, I think it's 20% or 30%, depending upon whether you work to get it. If you work to get it, which would be oil, because you have to bring it up, it doesn't just, I think it's 20%, 15%, something like that, I can't remember, but just, it's more than 2.5 by quite a bit. If that just alone from Saudi Arabia were to be given to the world, no one would be poor in the world. I'm not talking about Saudi. I'm not talking about Muslim lands from Australia, every Muslim in Australia to every Muslim in the west coast of I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in the world. So there'll be no one below the that's just Saudi Arabia. And I take it to Iraq, Libya, blah, 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 blah. There'll be no poor people. You'll be living, there'll be no NHS problems, right? So that's why it's not being implemented. What if the jungle is corrupt? The judge. These guys are crap. If the judge is corrupt, then in Islam, the only thing that's not below the Khalifa, the Imam, assigns the supreme judge. Okay? And then the supreme judge assigns other judges. Or the Khalifa can assign the supreme judge and the second tier judges. And then once he's assigned them, they become a separate entity. They don't become subject to the state. They become a parallel entity. Does that make sense? Meaning that they can judge on top of the Khalifa. If the Khalifa's done something wrong, they can judge against him. They become a parallel entity. They're not subject to corruption through the state. If they get corrupt, then the state punishes them. And what happens is that you've got tiers. So just like here, this judge is corrupt. Then you go to the one above them. You do an appeal, and all the way till you get to the European courts. Right? It works exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. And this is why. But also, even if the whole goddamn system's corrupt, yeah, and they're not following Islam. Remember, Sharia is parallel, right? So the Prophet peace be upon him says, "Ajaban li amri al-mu'min, amri al-muslim." Very strange be the ways of a believer. When something good happens to him, he says, "Thank you, Allah," and he gets rewarded for being thankful. When something bad happens to him, he's patient. He's not blasphemous. He's patient, and Allah rewards him. So this guy going through, or this girl that's raped, right? But there's no evidence. Then in this life, the rapist might get away with it, right? Under any law, might get away with it. It depends how intelligent he is and how dumb and thick everyone else is, right? Might get away with it in this life, but in the hereafter, he'll get, because he's assaulted her dignity, assaulted her honor, assaulted her body, and all the psychological, emotional turmoil that goes thereafter. I've dealt with rape victims. Yeah, it's not a nice thing to have happened to anyone. And her, okay, she might be a bit upset that no one's got her this life, but in the hereafter, her reward is immense because of the patience that she's gone through. You mentioned the state can be held accountable with all of the murder and torture, etc., happening in many Arab countries. How do we hold the state accountable? How do you respond to people who say it's haram to go against their leaders? In Arabic, they say that your leader, ifraz, the only term I use is then, and this is very applicable to some of today's leaders. But I'm going to have to find a nicer term for the other ones. For today's term, it's, the leader is an excretion, right, from the body of the of the state, right? Meaning, just like, you know, the sweat that comes out of you comes from your body. So you can't expect the leader to be better than the people. Do you understand? Like in Egypt, I'm Egyptian, so if anyone else is Egyptian, get offended, talk. But we deserved Hosni Mubarak for so many years because he would slap us, he would urinate on us, yeah, and we'd be like, oh, this is okay. He's bigger than my granddad. He's as old as my granddad, right? What should I say, right? Well, you know, I can't say anything. We should be patient, right? And this is not patience. This is passiveness. Patient is doing what needs to be done and keeping and persevering, right? If you get the results, then good. If you don't get the results, you keep persevering. That's patience, right? Patience is the people in Gaza fighting against an oppression. Patience is not that they should sit there and go, okay, we've been patient. That's not patience, yeah? And so when the people rise against their rulers, like Bashar, the donkey, Assad guy, when they go against him, they're getting battered. But they gave him that power in the first place. Because they stayed so quiet for so many years, him and his dad, that has given him, they've got 13 secret services. Who the hell has 13 secret services? You know why? So that each secret service can spy on the other one as well as on the people. How do you break into a system like that? And that's why what's happening is what's happening, right? That's why what's happening is what's happening. Because it's such a bottleneck. What happened in Egypt, again, people had to give their blood. Why? Because their fathers and their grandparents kept that system into place. Maybe even fed it. So we rise up against tyranny. Abu Bakr, for those that say it's haram, Abu Bakr, the first Khalifa, he said, follow me if I follow Allah and His teachings. And don't obey me if I don't. And Umar came and did the same thing. He said, follow me if I follow Allah and don't follow me if I don't follow Allah. Yeah? Now, everyone has faults. So we don't just rise up and fight a ruler just because he didn't pray Sunnah. Right? Or just because his wife, her hijab isn't as good as it should be. Do you see what I'm saying? But when he's committed crimes against the state, that's when we need to set into account. Not to topple him. And none of these revolutions were out to topple the government. They said, we want you to change. When they didn't change, they said, khalas, we want you to get lost. Yeah? So that's the way that you go about it. That's what you got. They've got to, and this is called Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar. This is Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar. There came a time in Muslim history where everyone would just, like in Mauritania now, there's a joke, he who wakes up first will do the coup. Right? Because every day there's another coup in Mauritania. That's not how we live as Muslims. There has to be something worth actually changing, because chaos is not good for anyone either. And no one will. You had a question. Yes.
In Tesco's, there's Muslims there that like sell alcohol.
Yeah.
And like clearly, like what I've been taught is the Prophet said he's cursed upon anyone that is involved in the transaction of alcohol. But then they'll tell me that what they're doing is they're providing for their family. Their intentions with Allah, they don't drink with it. And they don't buy the alcohol.
So the thing is, we're not allowed to drink alcohol, we're not allowed to sell alcohol, we're not allowed to carry alcohol, we're not allowed to produce grapes if we know that they're going to be sold to people that are going to do alcohol. 7 categories, we're not allowed to sit in the same table as someone drinking alcohol. And if any of these 7 categories happen, then a curse, Allah curses us. So you're saying that people work in Tesco and they're working and someone comes with alcohol, they have to sell it. The fatwa given by the European Council says that this is not your job. Your job is actually halal. It's allowed. Your job is to work and do very good things, right? You know, you're actually helping people. You know, you're part of a system that's providing goods for people. So that's your job. Part of your job is haram. That doesn't make your job haram. It makes part of it haram. If you can get out of it, then do. But if you can't get out of it, then don't quit your job. That's what they said. Why? But look for a better job. But until then, you're not sinning, because it's just part of your job. And because if you do that, then hardly anyone will be working. Now, if you own a restaurant, right, it's haram for you to sell alcohol. That's completely because you're the owner of that restaurant. Do you understand? But if you're working in where are you going to go that doesn't sell alcohol? Right? And for students working in Tesco or Sainsbury's or something like that, if you're not going to do that, so not doing it has disadvantages and darar and harm that could fall against the Muslims living in non-Muslim countries that far outweighs. So therefore, in that context, the Muslims have said, and this is not just the European fatwa. Hanafi scholars and jurists said this in India 700 years ago. So, yeah, so it's a good question, but that's just the quick answer. There was a question there, yes, and then we'll come to you.
Firstly, I'd like to thank you for this talk. My question to you is, do you advocate for Sharia law to be implemented in the country?
In here, UK?
Yeah.
No. Okay? I don't advocate for it because it has to be done within a Muslim country.
Do you want?
So this is the 4th time. This is the 4th time saying this. Yeah. Good question. So people definitely know. It's not to be done in this country because it's not a Muslim country. Our job here is to give dawah to non-Muslims, to teach non-Muslims about our religion, and then when everyone becomes when it becomes a Muslim country, then that you don't do it now. It's like bringing the sun down just so you can pray. You and then the brother. Yeah.
Yeah, just a question about wisdom and priorities. First of all, wisdom, because I think a couple of days ago there was a program on Channel 4 that a lot of us watched. Pride and Prejudice, I'm not sure if you
Okay, I don't watch it.
But it's about the EDL and
okay.
that stupid guy as well. But as in like, I don't know, but both that person was going down, telling everyone to implement Sharia. It's given really bad name for Islam. I'm just saying, in terms of our wisdom, how do we go about speaking to non-Muslims and
the only reason why I'm talking about
and also priorities is in terms of what is our priority here?
Sure.
Is our priority
our priority is not to establish Sharia at all. Our priority is to pray first. Half of us don't do that. Yeah. So and then to give to teach other people about Islam. The reason why I'm talking about this is because the far right are saying jizya. They'd love to pay jizya compared to what they're paying now just on VAT. Yeah, but they don't know what it is. Many Muslims in Egypt, for example, when you say to them Sharia law, they go no. Right? If I look at a girl, you're going to flog me. They don't know. 4 bloody witnesses. Right? Not just looking at a girl. Do you understand? They don't know what Sharia is, so they think that it's oppressive and barbaric. So all I'm doing right now is just letting you know that that's not what it is. Nothing like that at all. Our priorities are to do da'wah, is to call. Yes, sir.
Thank you for what you said. I was interested when you said that, you said, if I understood rightly, no country in the world you think currently practices Sharia law rightly. Is that what you said?
Comprehensively.
Comprehensively. Why do you think that is? I'm interested in.
Well, why do I think that is?
Yeah,
that's
right. Because that's kind of surprising to me.
Sure. I mean, there's international pressures. So when Sudan started to do it, all of a sudden they got boycotted like crazy. There's a lot of international pressure for many reasons. Because right now we have a world system in play, and there are obvious benefactors of that system and people that gain benefit from that. And those people see this as a threat. If you're not going to be charging interest on loans, then the whole thing falls. The whole thing falls. The IMF and whatnot. That's just interest. By the way, Britain pays billions of pounds in interest every year. I calculated if they had to pay jizya, they'd pay 3.6 billion, and they get everything with that, right? And they never have to go to war, and never this and never that. And that's not to say I'm not calling for Sharia law. I'm just trying to compare. Yeah. So that's one of the things. Malaysia Slowly they're trying to do it bit by bit, but there are international pressures. Somewhere like Saudi, there's corruption. There's internal corruption as well. They know what needs to be done, but there's internal corruption. We can go into the history of why that's happened, but the main yeah.
So you think there's pressure even on the states that are understood and accepted to be Islamic states?
Most of it's just a veneer.
Cannot go the whole way.
Most of it is a veneer. Most of it is a veneer.
A veneer.
A veneer. So
So
we're only.
Iran and so on, these places like Iran and
Yeah,
places, so
most of it is a veneer. When you find that rich person that commits a crime and a poor person that commits a crime, they get treated differently, then that's a veneer. That doesn't mean don't punish the poor person. It means that you're not implementing it 100%. Because remember the butterfly effect. When you do that, who's going to, the poor guy that doesn't have half a muscle, or the guy who's, you know, Gaddafi style, bringing people in and mercenaries? Who's going to oppress more? So when you punish this guy who can't do anything in the first place, and you punish this guy who's transgressing left, right, and you don't punish him. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a veneer. Sometimes a government will say, we're doing Islam, now shut up. We're doing Islam, now shut up. They're not. Not in the way that it's asked us to do it. Islam isn't what we understand it to be. Islam is what it is, and we do our best to understand it. But when someone knows what needs to be done and doesn't do it, and then says, but we have other reasons, that's a veneer. And not all of it's a veneer, but you know, some of it. Yes?
My question is regarding, you know, the 4 witnesses that you said. Can they be of any gender? Because I've been reading, and apparently a woman's testimony is worth half a man's testimony, or something like that.
There's a lot of difference in opinion. Some people say that witnesses can be of any gender. Some people say that it's. Some people would say that one man equals one woman. Some people say 2 women equal 1 man. Yeah, and there are very specific cases when Sharia says 2 women equals 1 man. But even then, because of the reason why it says that, now a lot of jurists say that reason isn't applicable anymore. And I mean, it's really technical to get into, but there are very good reasons for it, both sides. And actually, both sides can be applied in different contexts. So, with example to witnesses for fornication, a lot of people say it shouldn't even be a woman, unless there are good reasons for it, because you don't want her. But that was in a time where women didn't have to work. Whereas today, you know, if 4 women walk into an office and they see something happening, the secretary and the boss, right? Then they're there. That's it. It's the end of the story. But do you see what I'm saying? So culturally, why would 4 women see? It would be termed as an orgy. You see what I'm saying? So for the woman's sake, they wouldn't accept it. But now that would change. Now that would change because the women are everywhere. Well, in some societies they're not. Does that make sense?
Does it depend, like, on the crime? So
It depends on the crime, and it depends upon the context.
Okay, that's good.
Depends. Just as there are some crimes where a slave wouldn't be accepted. There are some crimes where the father is not accepted as a witness over his son. Why? Because, and there are some crimes where, basically, if someone has an interest in being a witness, i.e. is going to help further the case, they can be a witness. So there are many reasons why sometimes they're not witnesses, but bottom line is there's contention and differences on working.
My question is that since you were talking about Islam in the 21st century, I thought you were going to go more into the economic system of Islam as well, because at this day of age, we're living in an era of recession and there's huge problems with our economy. So I was wondering if you can...
Islamic economics. First of all, usually is 100% wrong. Second of all, Islam brought to the world this concept of trust. You know, when they say, I have a trust, Islam brought that. But the trust that we bring is completely different than the trust that you understand now. A trust now is where someone says, I give this trust is for my children. Right? Islam, you can't really do that. The trust is for Allah. And the trust does things. So you'll find hospitals that take tens of thousands of people every week were maintained by a trust, set up by a philanthropic billionaire, right? Universities, etc. It's all trust based. We don't accept usually. That's the first thing. A lot of what happened now, where you have a loan and then you get a loan on that loan and a loan on that loan, and then someone defaults and the whole thing, stack of cards just falls. That's completely prohibited in Islam from 14,500 years ago. You're not allowed, for example, to go to a tree and you say to the owner of that tree, I'm going to buy the fruits of that tree, now I'm going to pay you the fruits of that tree for £2,000. Why? Because you don't know. The tree might burn. The fruits might come down and they're rubbish. Right? You don't know. So you can only buy something that you know what it is there and then. If I go to him and I want to buy a car, and he is it, if I want to buy a Merc, and he is not Mercedes himself, he's just a middleman. He has to tell me, he's obliged in Sharia to tell me, I don't have it in stock. I have to go and get it. He's obliged to say that. Because if he doesn't say that, I think he has it in stock, and then he comes up and says, by the way, I don't have it in stock. Oh, I needed it yesterday. Oh, it's another 4 months. And then afterwards, see what I'm saying? Or when someone says to you, I'm going to build you a website. In Sharia, you have to show them what the website is going to look like beforehand. Why? Because you could build it as garbage, and they paid you, and you put some work into it, and you're like, but I worked, and they're like, but you didn't give me what I wanted. So in Sharia, it has to be very, very clear. So many rules that happen where, like I said, if Muslim state on 2.5% was running super, right? How is it that with 40% tax now, we're still, it's a farce. Someone like Richard Branson isn't paying more than your average person that's paying 40,000. That's getting paid 40,000 of tax. So there's lots of loopholes. Last question.
Some people say that we shouldn't live in a non-Muslim country unless we have reason to live there, such as education. What would you say to this?
So some people say don't live in a non-Muslim country unless you have a reason. And you stipulated some of them say education. Some of them don't even say education. I think that that's very, first of all, it's outdated. And secondly, it's very naive. Because you could be in Egypt and you feel like you're living in a non-Muslim country. And the satellite's there in front of you and you're seeing everything you're seeing elsewhere. People are swearing at each other. People sometimes here, they're implementing more Sharia than they are in Egypt. In terms of the justice, the poor man gets treated the same way the rich man gets. This is Sharia, right? This is Sharia. Whether they're implementing it unwittingly or not, that's part of Sharia. And so there are parts of Sharia here that aren't there. But when Turkey now is a very good example of an up-and-coming place. But again, they're slowly starting to implement Sharia, not 100%. That's a very naive thing. But you're supposed to live where you are going to best have the most good for you. The best place where you're going to have the most good for you. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much. I'm very honored to have been here. I hope that you have enjoyed and learned as much as I enjoyed.